Welcome to CityWorks, a co-production of the City University of New York School of Labor and Urban Studies and CUNY TV. I'm Laura Flanders. Each month, CityWorks explores the challenges and lived experiences of working people on the job, at home, and in our communities.
New York City is a union town. New York City is a union. When we talk about the importance of taking on the crisis of income inequality, we know that the most effective tool to do so is increasing union density.
Union leaders and organizers and labor scholars have been saying it for decades. Practically since the beginning of the modern labor movement, there is a direct link between union density and tackling the cost of living concerns of the working class. And now, the mayor of New York City is saying it. So, is New York City a union town? Sort of. Organized labor here is stronger than in the rest of the country, but that isn't saying so much. The unionization rate of the city's private sector is only 13.5%, almost half of what it was in the 1980s. Overall, only 1 in 5 New York City workers belongs to a union, a significant drop from the 1 in 3 unionization rate of the 1970s. Can Zohran Mamdani make New York City a union town again? Well, that's what we're looking at on today's CityWorks. If more New Yorkers start signing union cards, it will likely be because of the efforts of union leaders and activists like my two guests. Brandon Mancilla is the director of UAW Region 9A, which covers 34 locals, including locals in New York City and Puerto Rico. He was elected director in 2022 in the UAW's first ever direct elections to top leadership. He was 28 years old then and just out of graduate school at Harvard. UAW Region 9A has been on an organizing tear in the last few years, signing up workers in higher education, cultural institutions, nonprofits, auto dealerships, and plenty more. And speaking of higher education, we're joined by Robin Harvey, a clinical associate professor at NYU, New York University, and a member of both the organizing and bargaining committees for CFU-UAW, the union representing NYU's full-time non-tenure track faculty. After a year and a half of attempting to bargain a first contract with the university, the union waged a successful 2-day strike this past March, ultimately resulting in a contract with better compensation and stronger job security, as you'll hear. We have a whole lot more on that coming up. Thank you both for joining us. It is great to have you with us here on CityWorks. Let me start with you, Brandon. I read the piece that you co-authored for New Labor Forum. I encourage everybody to check it out. In it, one sentence really jumped out, and it was the sentence where you wrote that even the most progressive leaders have a hard time, struggle with understanding how to govern in labor's best interests. So here we are with this great new mayor. People are very excited. What's your advice to him, and what do you mean by governing in labor's best interest?
For too long, the labor movement has been considered a partner for endorsements in elections, and progressive candidates, moderate candidates, even some Republicans will court union endorsements and make some commitments. But I think we often lack a progressive vision for how labor and government can work together to actually transform the lives of working class people. So primarily with the election last year of Zohran Mamdani, our members were very interested in tackling the affordability crisis. Right. The first way that workers try to take control over their lives is to unionize, is to actually have a say in their working conditions, in their pay, in their benefits, a voice at work, so they can address the fact that they cannot afford to live in the city, so they can have stable wage increases, so they can have a cost of living adjustment, so they can have better health care and some retirement security. But wouldn't it be great if we had elected leaders who actually also care about those issues and are working to create an economy and a society that works for all of us?
What's the evidence you have so far that Zohran could be different? I mean, he didn't have those endorsements early in the primary.
Well, the example we had was that he was always showing up to our picket lines. We did not have to twist his arm or make any deals with someone like him for him to show up consistently. Since we're an organizing union, you mentioned how many different sectors and workplaces we've been organizing in over the last 5 years especially. We have always had strikes and picket lines and protests against unfair labor practices that employers have been committing against our members. So we are constantly out on the street And it's become, just an inside joke, during the last few years that Zohran Mamdani was one of the first people to always show up at our picket lines. And then also his platform, when he launched his campaign, when he spoke to us very early on about considering his endorsement, he told us that he was trying to tackle transit problems, childcare, and food costs, the rent, and those are all things that our members who tend to be younger, tend to be renters, want to be young parents and stay in New York City. Those are things that they're all struggling with, and the childcare victory he's had so far is a sign of his commitment to making the city more affordable.
Well, you've had a bunch of picket lines over the last couple of years, Robin, and most notably this one this March. Was the mayor there?
He wasn't here in March, but I will say that when we began bargaining in October of 2020, what year, 24, he did show up at our announcement of bargaining, which was a picket line. So we were really glad to see him there. He came, it was on Halloween, he came in his orange sweater.
Before we get much further, I do want to give you a chance to talk about your win there at NYU, because it epitomizes in a way the kind of organizing that the UAW is involved in, and we're going to be hearing much more. But it's so fresh and so exciting. What does it mean to you, especially as a clinical professor? Now, what does that even mean to be a clinical professor?
So, clinical professor is a title that is used for contingent full-time faculty.
And here I was imagining you in a white coat with a stethoscope.
Well, that's we actually have a lot of our faculty have argument with that title. So we're called, actually, our union is the Contract Faculty United, because that more adequately or more appropriately accurately explains what we do. I mean, my field, I'm in teaching and learning, so I train teachers, and so I kind of do have a clinical piece to the work that I do, a field work piece. But so we are full-time faculty at NYU who teach more than the tenure track faculty. We make less money than the tenure track faculty. We were initially envisioned as kind of a contingent workforce that was pulled into, like literally, one of the deans said, to exploit us and then throw us away, put us on contracts, throw us away. But gradually over the years, we've become much more professionalized. We are now leaders in our departments, leaders in our schools. Some of us have served as vice chairs of our departments, other leadership positions. So we've become a really integral part of the university. There are 930 of us at NYU, and that's almost half of the full-time faculty.
And what was your position before? What did you win with this contract?
So with this contract, we actually won when we think about the contingent nature of our work, we won presumption of renewal. So after 2 contract renewals, we are presumed renewable unless we do something that would merit our release. So we don't have to go through the whole contract renewal process every 3 or 5 or 7 years, which is really a quite lengthy process to prove our worth to the university that we've already been serving.
Brandon, how significant is this win, and how does it reflect your kind of organizing strategy as a union region here in New York?
I mean, it's essential. I mean, in the article we talk about how density is destiny, and what that essentially means is that unions have to commit to organizing, across the working class in different jobs and different sectors, but especially in the sectors where we already represent members and at workplaces where we already represent workers. We have to commit to organizing wall to wall, to have everyone represented by the labor movement, everyone organizing to win a fair contract, to raise all of our standards, because it's not just Robin and her colleagues who are going to benefit from this contract, but it's going to raise the standards for everyone we represent at NYU. And at NYU, we already represent graduate workers, we represent resident assistants, we are organizing with the postdocs, and we obviously represent the adjunct faculty for a couple decades now. And there's other unions also at NYU, and that was so inspiring to see so much of that solidarity out of the picket line for your strike, because I think everyone understands that if we win here, we all win.
Now, teachers, people in production, even medical staff, I think there's a general sense that those people, those kinds of workers, are represented by unions. But you touch on in your article, Brandon, that there is, I think, an idea in a lot of people's minds that certain jobs are kind of union jobs, or could be, and others aren't. So those of us who are gig workers or freelancers, as you talk about everybody, do you really mean everybody?
We mean everybody. I think the first misconception is that union jobs only exist. You need to get a union job.
That's right.
You become a city worker, or you become
Postal worker.
a postal worker, and that's a union job. Or you're in the building trades, you have a trade. That's just not the case. You can make a union job, by organizing. And I think that's the first lesson that the labor movement has to recover at a wide scale. There's been great examples of organizing happening. I think our union is a great example of that. The News Guild is organizing and having a lot of first contracts amongst tech workers and journalists. The Teamsters have organized a lot in the last few years. But we are falling behind. And even, I think, the AFL-CIO's at the national level commitment to organize falls well short of what it's going to take to actually reverse the declining union density that we have in this country.
Well, let's talk about why we've been falling behind. I mean, you're right. People made union jobs, and often in an era where it wasn't easy, it was difficult. There were reprisals. We've seen the films. There was shooting on the picket line. There was real lives at stake. Today, too, there's been a lot of backlash for organizers, a lot of firings of organizers. What else stands in the way of people organizing? Because there's a reason that people don't do it, right? They're afraid.
Right, we're trying to make jobs union jobs, but employers are trying to make union jobs non-union jobs and make sure that jobs are never made union jobs in the first place. So I think that's the first thing since Reagan. Before that, but definitely since the Reagan administration, we've seen a complete corporate management offensive against the labor movement. And that's when we saw the beginnings of the decline of the labor movement. And so first and foremost, it's a political problem. It's a political crisis that goes right alongside the rise of inequality, the consolidation of corporate power, and second, labor law. Labor law has not been seriously looked at and reformed since the 1930s, and the last reform of the labor law in this country, which was the Taft-Hartley Act, was actually a boss move. You know, it was a way to weaken the labor movement because the 1930s were thought of as so chaotic for business because of the fact that workers had a greater say in their working conditions and in their pay. So those two areas, it's political power for the working class, focus on building the labor movement, and it's actually having the power to transform labor law to give workers a fair shot at even organizing in the first place.
Were you afraid of reprisals, you and your colleagues there at NYU?
I think that was a big challenge for us. We actually have been organizing since 2017, so it took 9 years to get to this point. And it started with colleagues just going and talking to other colleagues. So I remember the first time that a group of colleagues came to our department and sat in a meeting with us and said, we want to try and form a union. It was back in 2017 or 2018. I think it was just massive numbers of one-on-one conversations, discussions with people. We're renewable. Our contracts are renewable. So if you're up for renewal, you don't want to.
That's right.
And I will also say that at NYU, contract faculty, many of us, we have young families. Right. We are in positions where we feel, more nervous perhaps about reprisal.
All of which brings us back to what can Mamdani do? What can the new mayor of New York do to change this scenario? We're going to talk a lot more about this, but Brandon, just to touch on a few top things. One, I'm hearing culture shift, perhaps, in terms of who could organize.
Right, yeah. I think the first thing that he can do, and he has begun to do, is use his bully pulpit. We talk about this in the article. He has been an outspoken supporter of labor since he was an assembly member and coming to all of our picket lines. But since he's been the mayor, he has sided with the nurses during the nurses' strike. He has absolutely signaled solidarity with 32BJ, for example, who took a strike vote earlier this week.
The janitors
and the janitors. And I think essentially he has done the role of really highlighting with his mega comms operation that he has to highlight workers' struggles. But one very concrete thing he did, which many of us were advocating for, was to have a deputy mayor for economic justice in his cabinet, in his administration. And he went to Julie Su and he appointed her. And Julie Su was the acting labor secretary under the Biden administration. And this is one of the things that the Biden administration did that was actually very positive. This was someone who's incredibly intelligent and savvy about labor politics and how to improve working class people's lives since her time in California to the White House. And now she's in City Hall trying to change that. And she was very instrumental in some of our more recent labor fights, including at NYU.
And the only reason she was acting was because the Republicans wouldn't have endorsed her.
That's right. That's right.
We're going to come right back. We're taking a short break. You are watching City Works much more with Brandon Mancilla and Robin Harvey after this. Welcome back to CityWorks. We're talking about rebuilding New York City's labor movement at a rare moment when the city's mayor is leading the union charge and walking picket lines with striking workers. I'm joined by Brandon Mancilla, director of UAW Region 9A, and Robin Harvey from CFU-UAW, the union representing NYU's full-time non-tenure track faculty. It really is an if not now when kind of moment. What are the top things you want the mayor to be doing, Brandon? We talked a little bit about the power of the bully pulpit. What else?
What we can also do is try to see how we can leverage city funding to ensure that organizing and collective bargaining are respected. I'll give you one example. Right now at CAMBA, which is a nonprofit, so in the private sector, and it does a lot of homeless services and housing services. We organize their IT department, and it's a small department, but CAMBA, using city funding, essentially decided to lay off these workers. That's what they're trying to do. When they went out on strike for a first contract, because it's been the process has taken 2 years to get to a first contract, which is too long. And I think that's an example there of how to leverage the fact that you give this organization millions of dollars in funding, and yet here they are union busting like Amazon does, like Starbucks does.
Coming back to you for a second, Robin, I wonder whether you've seen that culture shift that we started by talking about. Seems like that COVID moment changed a bunch of people, and then the protests around Israel-Palestine revealed just how important free speech rights are on campus.
Right. I think, I mentioned that our faculty, contract faculty, have been at NYU for an average of 15 years. I think our average age is 52 years and 4 months. So we're not quite the young people that you were talking about organizing, right?
So I think a while to get really good at Mandarin.
So I think that there was a real hesitation and also a lack of belief. I think, probably like many workers, many of us felt very much oppressed over the years and isolated. And the university and the workplace wants to keep us isolated. So we didn't know each other. We didn't talk to each other. People weren't aware of what the salaries were. People were maybe not aware of violations of faculty members' academic freedom. I think that came into real focus when we had our encampments on campus, and faculty were actually, within 12 hours of the encampment being set up, faculty were violently arrested protecting the students. So I think that came into real focus for a lot of people during that time. COVID definitely slowed us down, but I'm not sure it changed the trajectory. And then it was just from there, a lot of conversations with people to understand, NYU is a huge place, 930 faculty members. We teach in all different disciplines. I train teachers for New York City Public Schools, where my students graduate and go to join the union. Other colleagues teach, biology or math. And so our specialties are so different. So it was really, to use that metaphor, herding cats, right? But with each conversation, we got to know each other better. We got to understand that our circumstances are actually not as different as we thought, and the points of oppression were similar. And people started to have confidence in what we were doing. And then we went out on the picket line, and all these people were on. It was the most joyous, place. It included our students who we had been talking to all along. It included tenure faculty who we had been talking to all along. So we weren't just educating our union, we were educating our students, our other faculty members. I know administrators came out and brought us donuts on the picket line, or brought them donuts. So this long campaign of education and persuasion gradually built confidence, enthusiasm, and community. And people just talked about how they had never felt such community at NYU.
So that leads me to two questions. One, sort of, how do we get to that? How do we replicate that kind of class-wide?
Yeah.
Right.
And then I want to ask you, Brandon, how your story fits into this, because you come out of as a graduate student out of Harvard, and suddenly you're on the slate to transform the leadership of the UAW. How'd it happen?
So I come from a union family. My dad he was in a roofing and siding construction work, non-union, and back-breaking work. He couldn't do it anymore. And he then joined 32BJ SEIU as part of their residential services contract. He's a handyman, does it all in the building in one of these 34th Street, luxury buildings. And immediately we got better insurance, retirement security, and I was able to benefit from that growing up. So I knew right away that, a union life, the union standard is the way to go. So when I go to graduate school, I was studying Latin American history. I get to graduate school, and there's an organizing committee of my fellow grad worker colleagues trying to win their election. We won our election on the second try at Harvard, and then we won our first contract after going out on strike for 29 days. I was actively involved in that strike. I became the local president of the local when we formed the local.
Let me just to say, this was not easy, just in case you're
Oh no, it was not.
Harvard was not genteel
It
about
was
any of
not.
that.
Harvard, the reason we had to have a second election was because the first election, which we technically lost, was because they left hundreds of names off the election list. And so we finally won the second election and were able to bargain, but it took a long time to win that contract. We went out on strike again for a second contract while I was president. And then after that, I transitioned into being an organizer. I actually organized with one of the legal services locals, Local 2325 of the UAW here in New York City. I'm from New York, so I was in Boston and Cambridge for a while, but came down back home to Queens. And so I started organizing in that sector. And it was during that experience that I was recruited to run with Sean Fain and his team trying to reform the UAW.
Not just trying.
And we did.
Your family pretty proud?
Yes, they are very proud. And my dad is, part of that negotiating right now with 32BJ. So hopefully we get a successful agreement there, and we end the healthcare givebacks that the real estate board is trying to win.
We've emphasized the mayoralty of Zohran Mamdani.
Yeah.
He's one guy.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen overnight. What kind of a timeline would you encourage our viewers to hold as they think about making New York a union town again? Robin?
Well, I mean, it took us 9 years at NYU. So, but the vision setting started so early, right? And the people who were there in the beginning held that vision and kept working towards it in the face of COVID, in the face of the Trump administration, all the rollbacks to the NLRB, in the face of a new, an NYU administration as well that was challenging. They say the boss is the best organizer.
True.
Yeah, the boss is the best organizer, I think.
What about you, Brandon?
I think,
I just don't want people to wake up disappointed a week from now.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a process. I think for us, the union is independent of any political party. We will hold any elected official that we endorse or didn't endorse accountable to their agenda and why we endorse them. But we obviously want to see his administration succeed. He's made a lot of investments and commitments to improving the enforcement of workers' rights, and he's got a stated commitment to back unionization and organizing. I think one thing we haven't talked about is consumer and worker protection, which is very important. The appointment of Sam Levine to that position as a commissioner is very important. He's gone after, Taco Bell and Dunkin' wage theft, and so many other exploitative, consolidations of corporate power that make working people suffer and consumers suffer. So I think all of those are examples of steps he's taken. Obviously, there's a budget fight right now where I think the effort is to make sure that the result of this budget isn't austerity and cuts to working people. But obviously, that's going to be a struggle that goes beyond just the city council or the mayor. It goes to the state, and it goes to the state of the country with the federal situation we're in.
Well, I go back to if not now, when.
Right.
Thank you so much for your work, truly. Brandon Mancilla and Robin Harvey, it was wonderful speaking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's it for CityWorks. If you have comments or questions, write to us at cityworks@slu.cuny.edu. And if you like what you just saw, consider making a donation to CUNY TV or to the School of Labor and Urban Studies Foundation at the links below. For CityWorks, I'm Laura Flanders. Thanks for watching.